Thank you very much indeed, Sue. It's my pleasure to start by thanking, as President, TUC staff for their support and their work throughout another challenging year. And also to thank my union, Unite, for all the opportunities and support given to me as an activist and then as an official. A union isn't an inanimate object. It's a living, evolving force for change. As someone once said, there's power in the union, and it's great to be a part of it. So let's take heart that union membership has grown for the 4th year in a row. That's cause for celebration. Our focus is to do even more to build membership and organisation. During my year as president, we have seen 2 women earn their place as leaders of our 2 biggest unions. Christine McAnee, Unison's first woman elected as General Secretary by a union with a majority of women members, representing workers at the forefront for providing essential services throughout the pandemic. Yet for many, their women's work is still undervalued and low paid. Christina is dedicated to changing that, and I'm proud to have her as a sister and a friend. And my friend Sharon Graham, my goodness, an organiser and negotiator of extraordinary ability, winning campaigns that others said could not be won. Quite rightly, Sharon points out there's a library of policies highlighting inequalities women face at work, and she has pledged to bring to the bargaining table our demands for action. 20 years ago, my union held a girls' lobby of the CBI. Our daughters demanded equal pay in our lifetime. My daughter was 8. Eleni is now 28. The fact that in 2021, women effectively work the first 64 days of the year for free makes my blood boil. So let's take inspiration from the women's suffrage movement. Now is the time for deeds, not words. And let's be clear, a public sector pay freeze and an offer to the NHS that falls far short of what they need and deserve is picking the pockets of the majority female workforce who stood between us and despair when we needed them most. A shameful affront which says so much about Tory values. During the pandemic, many have seen the disproportionate impact of lockdown on carers, mostly women. Now, a brief look at our history shows this juggling of care, of work and of activism isn't new. 34 brothers founded the TUC in 1868. 75 years later, in 1943, the TUC elected their first woman's president, Anne Loughlin. When Anne was 12, her mother died. She cared for her 4 sisters. She was 16 when her father died and became the family breadwinner, working for threepence an hour in a Leeds clothing factory. Aged 21, she took up as an organiser for the Tailor and Garment Workers Union, and the following year, she led a strike of 6,000 clothing workers in Hebden Bridge and became her union's General Secretary in 1948. Anne was one of only 6 women TUC presidents up until the year 2000. The millennium has evened things out. However, when I'm asked, does having women in the leadership of a union make a difference, I say, damn right it does. Alongside the 13 unions now led by women, we also celebrate the women who lead the TUC, the Wales TUC, Scottish TUC, Irish Congress and International TUC, and of course our own TUC. Remember, sisters, the words of the African-American civil rights activist Angela Davis. Sisters in leadership, lift as you rise. The TUC report that emerged from our Disabled Workers Committee on sexual harassment showed disabled women face an appalling level of workplace abuse that must be resisted and reversed alongside our movement calling out the increase in hate crime against our LGBT+ members. And Here I'd just like to show my appreciation to Patrick Roach for his leadership of the TUC's Anti-Racism Task Force. As Patrick will tell us later in Congress, the case for radical change is overwhelming. We know collective solutions and actions safeguard the rights of individual workers, and unions are beginning to make inroads into the gig economy. Well done, GMB, in winning recognition and a fair deal for Uber drivers. And over the year, our movement has again proven we are a force for good. The TUC and our affiliates work to support our incredible vaccination programme, delivered not by the private sector, but by our wonderful NHS. Vaccines developed by our brilliant scientists and academics, many of them Prospect and UCU members, and administered by our members in the NHS. Combined, our unions represent the UK's biggest democratic mass movement. We are a movement of and for working people. And it was union health and safety reps who knuckled down safeguarding workers at the height of the pandemic. They fought to ensure workers had the correct PPE, negotiated COVID-secure work practices, and exposed negligent employers. We owe them so much, and all our reps. Hundreds of thousands of workers doing extraordinary things, representing their colleagues, winning decent pay and conditions, fighting for equality, and helping workers access life-changing learning opportunities. Their efforts mean unionised workers earn more, are paid more equally, have more access to training, are more likely to have better pensions and holidays, and are safer at work. As the world changes, so must trade unionism. So we look, sound and feel more like the workers we aspire to represent. Our challenge is to rebuild our values of equality, solidarity and collectivism at the same time as making sure we remain relevant in the world of Netflix, WhatsApp and Spotify and goodness only knows what else, in an age when decisions, choices and communications happen in the blink of an eye. We must liberate the potential of 21st century technology, exploring new gateways into trade unionism, new models of membership, and new ways to organise and bargain. This is especially relevant to our young members and the mass of young workers not yet signed up. And we're an international movement. Those of us supporting the struggle against apartheid remember and repeat today the South African workers' slogan, "An injury to one is an injury to all." The far right's ruthless targeting of women's abortion rights in Poland, Texas, and elsewhere goes hand in hand with what the UN calls the shadow pandemic, the upsurge in violence against women and girls. TUC Aid helped fund the Building and Woodworkers International programme of training to tackle violence against women and girls, training that reached thousands of workers across Latin America and the Caribbean, and that's solidarity in action. We have also seen far-right authoritarian regimes using the COVID crisis to crack down further on workers' rights, whether it's in Hungary, Brazil or India. We must continue to build solidarity with our sisters and brothers facing brutal violence in Colombia. Over 100 activists have been killed this year so far. And we stand with those facing arrest and repression in Turkey, as we stand in solidarity with our sisters and brothers in Palestine. We repeat our demands for an end to the injustice and an end to the brutal and illegal occupation. Saying these words takes me back to meeting the Colombian trade union leader Carmen Mayusa in Bogota Women's Prison. We campaigned and she was released. Then her brother's butchered body was delivered to her family home. And of the Palestinian children, Congress, I met in refugee camps and villages in the West Bank and Gaza during the First Intifada, whose artworks invariably showed violence against their families and the destruction of their homes. When we speak of solidarity, we must remember that each and every one of us is a trade unionist, and every one of us struggle is one of us, and that solidarity is two ways. We stand together. Our fight for economic, social and racial justice and peace extends beyond national borders. Decent work for all must be at the heart of a new global economy. Our history tells us the best way to improve pay for all workers is to raise standards through strong unions and collective bargaining. We can look back proudly at historic victories such as the chainmakers of Cradley Heath, the so-called match girls of London's East End, and the Ford sewing machinists in Dagenham and their sisters in Halewood. Yet in so doing, it is our collective responsibility to win for workers here and now, tomorrow, and in the decades ahead. Solidarity to you all, here and globally. Have a good Congress, and remember, above all, actions speak louder than words. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. And I now call on Sharon Graham to move the vote of thanks to the President.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Gail. Chair Congress, Sharon Graham Unite, moving the vote of thanks to TUC President Gail Cartmail. I am truly proud and privileged to move this vote of thanks to Gail, my colleague, my friend, and my trusted sister. We've led disputes together, we've been on demonstrations together, we've negotiated together, and of course, Gail, we've had a party or two together on many, many occasions. But don't worry, Gail, I won't be telling those stories here, not just yet. Gail is a hugely generous person and hugely generous with her time. She has been a constant source of encouragement and strength to me and many, many other women. In the recent Unite election, many people told us to stand down, said we couldn't win, said it would be impossible. And when you're in a place like that, you look to people, you turn around to see who is behind you, and when I did, there was Gail. She was the first one to contact and say you must stand. She didn't take the easy option. She never does. Through the difficult parts of a sometimes toxic period, Gail was a tower of strength. And without that strength, I wouldn't be here today as the first woman General Secretary of Unite. So thank you, Gail, and thank you for all you do. But that's what she does. She supports, she gives a helping hand, and quite simply, she is very, very kind. Like so many other women in our movement, Gail started her working life as a school leaver. She was just 15. She was employed as a hairdresser. I often smile when I think of this. I imagine the captured audience sitting in the chair, Gail with a pair of scissors, trying to persuade them to come behind one cause or another. Before long, Gail moved into the print industry, and this really is where she cut her teeth in the trade union movement. She was elected Mother of the Chapel in 1975, and that's when she began to defend workers. She was one of very few women in her workplace, and this really defined and shaped her. It made her very determined and extremely focused. Her experiences in those early years have stuck with her and guided her through her working life. In 1990, she founded Socialist Women on a Male platform to push out women's voices, to ensure women could be heard. She is constantly looking for ways to drive women forward. Gail is also a focused negotiator. When we first worked together, it was on leverage during the Besna construction dispute. And at that time, leverage was very new. And it would have been really easy for her to resist such a campaign that pushed boundaries and went against the usual playbook. But Gail understood leverage immediately. She championed it as another way to push back bad employers. Gail always shows a lot of courage and very little fear. Moving now away from the bargaining table and turning to conferences, in the evening, Gail and I would slip out of the crowd, get fish and chips, and have a glass of wine or two. Our conversations would literally last for hours. I have certainly learned a lot from Gail. What a formidable woman. Gail absolutely believes in the power and the potential of trade unions, that we are a force for good, that we are the vanguard. We can deliver real change for the lives of working people. And for the future, Gail will be where she's always been, for the last 40 years, at the front of the fight, stopping workers paying for this pandemic, pushing back emboldened employers who think that they can get workers to pay for this crisis. Congress, we've only lent Gail to the TUC this past year, and I know what a proud moment it has been for her. As a 15-year-old woman leaving school, she never imagined that she would be president of the TUC. It was a moment we spoke about often, and Gail, that moment now is here. And it also has been a huge privilege for her union, Unite. Gail, we couldn't be more proud of you today. I know you will do an incredible job for the rest of the week. Congress, I am proud to move this vote of thanks to my friend, my comrade, and my sister, Gail Cartmail. Thank you.
Sharon, thank you so much. And I'm now really delighted to second the vote of thanks for my colleague and my friend, Gail. I'm also pleased to follow you, Sharon, as Unite's new General Secretary, and to take this opportunity to wish you every success in the important work that you have ahead. Congress, it's been an extraordinarily challenging year to be the TUC's president, and that is the case both professionally and personally for Gail, but she's done it with style. I'll say no more about this just now, but if you haven't already seen it, I'd recommend that you watch Gail's piece on YouTube, details of which have been circulated with the Congress update today. And if you're not moved, I'd be surprised. As Gail says in that piece, General Counsel and executive members have seen plenty of each other, albeit on screen, over this period, including a few meetings that Gail chaired whilst with her family in Greece. And I have to say that Gail is always calm and inclusive in the chair, and that her usual assurance was hardly at all affected by being in a different time zone. Though there was just one occasion, and I don't even know if you're aware of this, Gail, when she inadvertently caused some confusion amongst the rest of us about whether the meeting was running to Eastern European or British summertime. Actually, I think we all just wish we were there in Greece with you at that meeting. Now, Gail and I joined the General Council at the same time back in 2005. We became founding members of the Union Learn Board, and I'd like to think we played a part in the great achievements of Union Learn, right up until this government spitefully withdrew funding from it. Gail is also the long-standing champion and chair of TUC Aid, another important TUC body focused completely on practical capacity building for trade unions internationally. And I know that Gail is particularly proud, and rightly so, of the recent project involving Building and Woodworkers International that she just spoke about, building trade union activism on violence against women in Brazil, Latin America and the Caribbean regions. Violence against women is an issue for all of us, everywhere. And closer to home, Gail stepped forward too to lead the TUC's work on how trade unions as employers deal with sexual harassment and, importantly, on preventative strategies. We all know in the wake of the Me Too movement that this is difficult and sensitive work, and especially so in democratic organisations. So all the more important that it is led wisely and well. Well, Gail's your woman for that. And I can say that not just in a personal capacity, but also on behalf of the TUC Women's Committee. Now, over the last year, I've had the opportunity to work particularly closely with Gail on industrial issues. And I do want to say how fantastic it is to work with somebody so honest, perceptive, and organised as Gail, and who you know, without doubt, will have your back. Because Gail is a woman, a leader who lives her values, who has lifted as she's risen. I admire her for that, perhaps almost as much as I admire her ability for early morning outside cold water swimming through most seasons of the year, something I definitely cannot do. Now, It's a shame, Gail, you don't have the opportunity to preside over our traditional in-person Congress. But as we've seen already this afternoon, there's important business to be done, and I look forward to you leading us through it. Thank you for everything you've done.